How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. We got a chance to sit down with Cade O'Neill, who is a CPA. He's an accountant, and we were able to ask him about some big changes that are coming here very soon for crypto, specifically Bitcoin. Some big changes that happened this week and that are happening in just a few months. Two things I think will change the crypto market, and we got to have an accountant's point of view on it. So, stay through to the end of the video. We'll also talk about some of the cryptos that he talks about over on his channel and what he's bullish on, what he's buying as well. So go check him out underneath the video. I'm going to leave a link to his channel. He just started a few months ago and is growing pretty quickly. So you can see future videos on his channel. Also, if you want to trade crypto, there is a link underneath the video to Margex where you can start trading without KYC. And you don't need a VPN either. You can start trading in just a few seconds if you want to long the market or short the market, and you can use all different forms of collateral. Like, for example, you can trade Bitcoin with Solana. You get paid out in Solana and use Solana as collateral, but you can do that with Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, XRP, Cardano, all those kinds of cryptos. So definitely check this out underneath the video, but let's get into it. All right, Cade, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Let me know what you think right now about the market, because we have been pumping. How are you feeling?
Hey Sam, yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean the market overall, it looks pretty good. Obviously, where we're at definitely beats the alternative of where we've been over the past, several months or so. And so, I'm definitely feeling good. Obviously, as we start to get a little bit more bullish and excited about things, I do start to get a little bit nervous, just because I do recognize the market's tendency to do the exact opposite of what most of us wanted to do. So, but yeah, overall, I'm feeling pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the fact is we've chopped around so long. I feel like so many people are just starting to get back into the market. Like, it takes a little bit after we start pumping up for people to get interested again. So it's nice just to have some more people interested in what's happening instead of just an endless chop sideways. It does seem like, with certain things too, with the Fed cutting rates and with China, with all the news about their stimulus this week, seems like people think that this is a change for the market. And obviously, like we were just talking, there are a couple big things that have happened even this week and that happened a couple months. And I wanted to get your opinion on them since you're an accountant. Earlier this week, I think just yesterday, it came out that the SEC approved BNY Mellon to be a custody Bitcoin. I'm kind of curious. This is after the SAB 121 big problem earlier this year, where the SEC wouldn't allow banks to custody Bitcoin. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Why is it such a big deal for the markets?
Yeah, so the thing that is interesting with SAB 121, and I guess maybe before I get started into any of this, I should be clear that none of this is tax, legal, accounting, financial, any sort of advice you could imagine, just because this is purely based for entertainment, and typically information like this is far more complex than somebody can just give a blanket answer on YouTube for. So yeah. I just want to clarify that. But yeah, with SAB 121, the thing that's unusual, I guess you could say, about it is how generally things are custodied for it, like a financial institution. Is like, let's say I have $1,000 held with Chase. Chase doesn't, or I guess I should say gold or an asset, right? Like Chase doesn't necessarily recognize that as like something that sits on their balance sheet, because control and ownership are two different things, right? And so at least up until now, the general statement or the general recognized understanding has been that if you have control over something, that doesn't necessarily require you don't need to bring that onto your balance sheet, right? Because the balance sheet is something that you control, or you own and have like some sort of liability or asset toward. So the thing that is interesting with SAB 121 is that kind of like applies to everything except crypto. And that's kind of what's been frustrating to many in the crypto industry thus far, is because it's kind of been excluded from something that basically no other financial instrument has to comply with. And so this, essentially the main impact on this is that you have this, this requirement of a volatile asset that can go, obviously up and down and sideways and all these different types of things very dramatically. And so it's been kind of not necessarily illegal for banks, but banks don't want to take it on as part of their risk profile. Because if you have something super volatile on your balance sheet, it can obviously impact your reporting fairly dramatically. And if you're a bank that is built on not being volatile, having something like that on your balance sheet is generally a pretty big risk and not really worthwhile to do, in the general financial environment that we're sitting in. So that's kind of like the main implications, I would say, with like SAB 121.
And that doesn't affect financial institutions like IBIT or like BlackRock, right? Because they don't show $10 trillion worth of assets and $10 trillion worth of liabilities when you look up their financial statements, right? They might have AUM of that, but they're not showing all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know the nuances well enough in terms of how like the SEC filing counts around that. But yeah, I think essentially because it's an asset essentially wrapped into a security, the security now becomes the asset, right? So that's kind of the difference there. Again, I don't actually know like the details well enough to be able to kind of comment exactly of why the difference is. But what I do know is that generally when that something like gets wrapped into an asset or a security like that, the security now becomes the asset, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And I guess the next natural question is, okay, BNY Mellon can now custody Bitcoin. Like, how does that help people? Like now, can more companies buy Bitcoin because they couldn't buy IBIT, or like, why does this actually help the Bitcoin price at all?
I don't know if it helps the Bitcoin price from a fundamental perspective, meaning like now we're going to see these floodgates of liquidity open or things like that. What I think we're seeing, and what I think we will continue to see, particularly with this type of stuff, is just a general kind of softening of like hostility towards the crypto market, right? As we start to see more institutions open up toward crypto and become a lot more amenable to crypto, and it kind of legitimizes the asset as a whole, right? And so I think, to me, this is the major development here, is just more general regulation, I guess like regulatory friendliness to crypto, because as we obviously have seen over the past several years, that has not been common.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then obviously like FASB accounting rules are changing a little bit too. We were just talking about how different institutions account for Bitcoin on their balance sheets. So what's the big change with that? Because that's coming up fairly soon as well, right?
Yeah, so essentially the general change is what crypto has been discovered or has been kind of classified as in the past as an intangible asset, which from like the definition of the word seems to make sense, right? I mean, it's not tangible, it's magical internet money, as some may say, right? But so it's been continued to be considered an intangible asset. And from like my experience, it doesn't necessarily, like, the things that I would generally consider an intangible asset are not crypto, but that's just kind of how it got classified. And so what has historically happened is when you buy an intangible asset, you're generally supposed to be recording it at cost on your balance sheet, and then you're supposed to essentially assign a useful life to it and amortize it. Now, how this works specifically with Bitcoin, I don't exactly know, because I don't see how there's a useful life on Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And so it could be something where they don't actually amortize it at all. They just leave it there. However, the problem is, though, you are not able to capitalize on the gains, right? If you bought 10,000 Bitcoin at $15, 8 years ago or 9 years ago, well, that's great, but you're still holding it at $15. And that's generally how it is for intangible assets, because everything is recorded at historical value. What has changed, and this is where I think, and this to me is where crypto, I think, should kind of be sitting. Again, not accounting, financial, any sort of like advice like that, but this is kind of where I think crypto should be sitting kind of more realistically, is as a security, because there are securities and there's different ways that you can treat securities on the balance sheet. You can have held to maturity, you can have available for sale, and you can also have there's another one I'm blanking on right now. But there's generally three main classes that you can hold these securities as, and how you determine to hold them is essentially it determines how you classify them, right? And so if you have something that's available for sale, that's usually marked up to market rate because you are looking to sell it at any point in time. If you have something that's held to maturity, this is usually something like in the case of a bank, this would be something like a mortgage or a term loan or something like that. And so what we've seen actually recently is anybody paying attention to banks' balance sheets, they have massive unrealized losses on their balance sheets because there's a whole bunch of 2% mortgages sitting out there that are held to maturity, right? And that's part of the reason why they don't make you mark those to market, because it would trash banks' financial statements for like the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But if you had any reason or any point at which you would want to sell those, then you would actually have to take the loss on those. But if you plan on holding them to maturity, you don't necessarily have to mark them to market because it's just part of kind of your portfolio. So,
Well, I appreciate you digging into that. I know it's hard to sometimes get good information on a lot of these like accounting changes. Sometimes someone will break it down, like someone really smart will break it down on Twitter, but a lot of the time it's just, kind of an echo chamber of what people think, and that kind of morphs a little bit. But obviously, I think it unlocks more capital when things like this change that make it a little bit easier. It looks a little bit prettier on your balance sheet, so that way you're not just showing losses and then never showing any gains. So those are two big changes I wanted to ask you about, because I do think it kind of changes the landscape moving forward, makes it a little bit easier for companies to want to buy Bitcoin, or they can just buy it easier, right? If the bank that they work with will buy it for them at a low cost or something. Moving to something a little bit more fun. I know that you talk about several different altcoins on your channel. What are you bullish on now? And then have you been buying anything recently?
So recently I've been spending kind of most of my buying power on Bitcoin, just because I think that, it kind of remains to be the main store of value. I think it's got the most stable long-term prospects. Obviously, there are several things I talk about on my channel, one of which that's become kind of a mainstay on my channel recently is internet computer. I know there's, a lot of varying attitudes and perceptions toward that. I was a little reluctant to even go into it. Somebody actually recommended it in my comment section. I was like, I do read all of my comments, and so I actually have a list of like things that are recommended to me, and so that was one of them. And I actually went into it, and I was a little reluctant just because of some of the things that I had heard. But going into it, like it's really interesting. There's so many problems that people are trying to solve in crypto, like interoperability, bridges, like liquidity fracturing, all of this type of stuff, right? Development on Bitcoin is another big one. Like ICP solves a lot of these. And so it's kind of confusing to me why it hasn't caught a little bit more mainstream attention. Just because, obviously I'm still doing my research and trying to learn more about it because it is a massively complex project. But I'm still definitely trying to like continue to do my research, and maybe there's something I haven't figured out yet. But ultimately, from a pure like technical perspective and some of the development that we've seen, yeah, I don't know. To me, it looks like it might be a hidden gem. Again, time will tell. But that's one that has kind of been sticking out to me lately.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't talk about it too much, but hey, if you've made it this far in the video, just know you can go to Kate's channel, write a little comment, and you can get an actual accountant that's been in crypto for a long time to answer your questions and maybe make a YouTube video on the crypto you want. So definitely go follow him, like I said before. But that's cool. Yeah, I don't dive too much into ICP. I remember, I think it launched last bull run, if I'm right, and again, just trying to think back. I think I looked at it and they were diluting a decent amount at that time because they pumped up heavily. I think like $400. Now they're at $9, and they've come up maybe 2-3x from the bottom.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then obviously it looks like you talk about Caspa and Jasmine. We talk about Caspa a little bit on this channel too. But do you have well, I guess, do you have like a top 10 altcoin that you really like that's outside of Bitcoin, like a layer 1 or something?
I don't know. I remain to be a fan of Ethereum. I do like, I'm one of those, I'm not necessarily a maxi in any particular crypto. I can see kind of the benefits and the drawbacks of both, or like kind of both sides. ICP, I mean, generally the comment that I get is oh, well, the tokenomics suck, which,
Hmm.
fair. I can't, does look like it's getting better. Ethereum generally, the question is like, or I guess the complaint is, oh, well, it's had its time in the sun. It's time for something else. Maybe, right? I don't know. But for me, the thing that I think remains a little bit unplayed out in Ethereum is this whole layer 2 setup. If you look at the fundamentals of how layer 2s are actually doing on Ethereum, the growth has been ridiculous. I mean, it's mainly attributed to Base particularly, which does make kind of sense because of Coinbase.
Yeah.
But, the growth has been ridiculous. And so I think the main problem to me that remains within Ethereum is the liquidity fracturing, just because the more L2s you get, at least at the current point in time, the more liquidity gets fractured, which I think is a really bad thing. But if Ethereum can fix that, then, maybe it looks good. Solana, I think there's a lot of really interesting depend projects moving on to Solana, which is, I think, encouraging to see.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a big meme coin fan.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't like them. Like, I did the whole Doge thing back in 2021 and whatnot. I just feel like there has to be something more to crypto than meme coins, right?
Yeah.
I love, meme casinos are great and everything, but like, there just has to be something more. And so the fact that, like, that's my only kind of concern with Solana. The fact that we are seeing a lot more depend building on Solana, I do really like, though.
Gotcha. Yeah. I guess then the big question is, obviously it's easy. People think it's hard to buy, but it's really easy to buy. The hard thing is selling. Do you plan on selling any of your Bitcoin or any of your alts? Obviously, like, it is a really touchy subject as a creator to talk about it, because when you're selling is generally when the most people are coming into the market. So it's really hard to like talk about selling at that time. That's why I've been talking about for the last year, like, hey, this is when I plan to sell. Get your plan ready, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm selling everything today or something like that. And I won't be doing that. I'll be scaling out. But I'm curious if you're holding on, just saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to go up. I'm not going to try to time the market. I'm not going to pay taxes, that kind of stuff. Or are you like, hey, at this time or at this level, I'm going to scale out?
Yeah. So for me personally, it's hard, right? Like, especially when you get there, like, greed kind of kicks in, and like, you can kind of derail yourself pretty quickly and pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm trying to do as the market goes is, one thing I'm trying to do is kind of separate my portfolio, right? There are some things, like, I know at the peak of the bull run, there's a point in which you could probably sell and then buy in lower, and like, you kind of have this like impermanent gain, I guess, right? That you're looking at. I've considered it, but for me, it's just a pure, like, out of principle, I want to have a portion of Bitcoin that I will never sell. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably the only alt that I'm like realistically looking to never touch. Otherwise, I would say it's probably more of like, I might keep a little bit just so I don't get like the FOMO going on.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think I'm going to be trying to move out of most of them, other than the ones that I have extremely high conviction in. One thing that I talk about on my channel a lot is, like, with ICP particularly, I'm skeptical that this cycle could be the cycle that it takes off, just because it still seems very advanced compared to kind of what the rest of the crypto market is talking about. And so that's one that, like, maybe I potentially hold between cycles. Again, who knows? It's really, really hard to say. But yeah, Bitcoin, I think, is really the only one that I'm kind of committed to not selling 100% of it.
Sure. And it makes sense, right? Bitcoin is less volatile than everything else. So you're going to, if you sell out and you pay 15% capital gains, it has to drop a decent amount to really make it worth it, right? Compared to, I don't know, XYZ crypto that goes up 20x. In the bear market, you're not going to be feeling the same emotional attachment to some crap coin that you do when it's gone up, 5x in the last week.
Yes.
But that's similar to my stance too. I'm going to sell some Bitcoin, but I'm going to have a fat stack that I hold on to, hopefully forever. And then I'm going to sell pretty much all my alts. Even if I feel FOMO, I'm going to sell all of them, hopefully, with the exception of maybe a few $100s for like different transactions and stuff, to make it a little bit easier for me to run the transactions. But I also realize like I'm in a bit of a unique situation because my income will probably be highest at the top of the market. So I'll feel naturally like I don't have to take profits, and that like the amount of money might not be like, oh, I need this. I need to sell a quarter of a Bitcoin, right? I don't need to, but I probably should, right? So it's going to be weird for everyone. Everyone's in a different situation, but I think it is important to flex that selling muscle at some point. So I'm already looking at like, okay, when am I going to sell? And it's going to be way too early. Everyone's going to hate me if I talk about it, or they'll just, I'll feel like an idiot until a year and a half later when I'm like, oh, that was probably a decent time to start selling.
I think the main way to look at it is like everybody's going to feel like an idiot who doesn't sell at the Pico top while the Pico top is here, right? But everybody who did is going to feel much less of an idiot at the bottom than everybody who didn't sell when they also had all these fat paper gains at the Pico top. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. Yes, none of us are going to time it correctly. And another issue is like, especially if you're, like I would say most of us who are in the crypto industry pretty deep, like, I might have 100 different coins worth $1,000, and each one you're going to look at and be like, it's only $1,000. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe not. But it's like when you put it all together, it's like, that's $100,000, right? Yeah. So you also have to remember, like, if you play that way, especially where you're spread through a lot of different coins, like that you have to consider that as well.
Yeah, it is really hard to manage. Obviously, they'll probably move up relatively in unison with a couple outliers either going down or up. But that's why it is more responsibility every single token you get. And when ETH fees go up and you hold $500 of ETH on some wallet, well, you're going to pay $100 to move it or something like that. So that's why I do try to focus on like 10 or less cryptos. And of course, I play with some other ones, but yeah, you almost have to set a time where like, okay, even if this is not the best day to sell it, like I have 100 coins, I just need to go through every single wallet and sell them like for 5 hours. I just need to spend time and transferring and selling them. But yeah, Cade, I appreciate having you on. Obviously, we'll have to have you on in the future too. Any closing thoughts on where we're at in the market or any tips for people?
Overall, I would say, I feel pretty good, with where we're at so far. Usually, most healthy markets climb a wall of worry, before we actually get into kind of the euphoria phase. And so I think, kind of the longer that we can hold on to just reasonable measured gains, it makes me feel good at least. But yeah, and also, don't let the emotions get to you, right? And if you're somebody who is huge into FOMO, like you should probably not sell all again, not financial advice, but like you probably shouldn't sell all of your tokens because that may actually end up costing you more in the long run because you're going to get back in and get wrecked. So you have to, part of it's knowing your strategy and knowing yourself and making sure that you execute what that is, regardless of whatever my thoughts or whoever's thoughts might be. I think that's really important.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much for jumping on the channel. Everyone, check out Cade's channel underneath. If you want to try out Margex, you can start trading cryptos, or you can, maybe you're using a different platform and you want another platform just in case your exchange goes down. Coinbase went down yesterday when the market was pumping. You can check out the link to Margex underneath, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Of course.